Live.
Live. You are live with the deep with Mr. B.
BB
Mr. BB.
with Mr. BB.
Indeed, Mr. BB.
Hey.
We are live in the D with Mr. BB. We're joined today by Miss Natasha Mynier, who is the director of In a Beat Film, a film on YouTube about Daryl, a young Black autistic boy who convinces his mom to let him stay home alone so she can pursue a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But when an unexpected circumstance surfaces, he must find a unique way to cope with his meltdown alone, inspired by a true story of a young boy's experience with autism and sensory processing disorder and his path towards independence. And we're joined by the director of the film now, Miss Natasha Mynier. How are you?
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I'm good. Thank you so much for being here. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So this is my first, full film, I would say. But I've been working as a commercial director and cinematographer through our company, 37 Lanes, for about 5 years now. And we live in Los Angeles, and our offices are in Santa Monica.
Okay. Thanks. So how did you decide to have this project as your first? How did In a Beat come to be?
So In a Beat is actually inspired by the story of my cousin and his experience with his autism spectrum diagnosis. So, basically what happened in his real life was kind of rhythmic pattern based. Like the ending of the film is very much based off of what actually happened to him on the first time he was left home alone. So we used that inspiration and then took the fact that it's a film about music therapy and combined it with another kind of big passion of mine, which is dance and tap. I grew up dancing for like 20 years, and so I took many of my experiences as a tap dancer, but also tied up with just some really amazing tap dancers like Chloe. So the film, I guess, was really just born out of my goal of telling an authentic story about autism, but also specifically about the Black experience with autism, because it's so deeply underrepresented. And because of that, I wanted to tie it to, out of all the dance forms, the one that really has the most like representation in the Black community, which is tap, right? It's a historically Black art form. And so the whole film is meant to kind of be like a representative film for Black autism, but also be something that is just authentic to my cousin's experience,
Right. And I can relate to that. I have a cousin who actually has autism as well. I forget what the exact diagnosis is, but I believe it's Asperger's, which is I believe it's Asperger's, yeah, which is a form of autism. So when I saw the film, I was like, oh, okay, I can, again, a cousin too, so I can relate to this. I want to hear more about this. So thank you for creating this film and getting that representation out there, because, yeah, that story definitely needs to convey. And that you actually answered one of my other questions. Why was it important for you? Because you're obviously a Caucasian woman, but to have people of color represented in this film as the autism.
Well, it's kind of a interesting multi-layered question for me, because yes, I am Caucasian, but I'm also not. My dad is Indian and my mom's American. And so I actually, when my dad came to the United States, he was adopted and brought to the US. And so my kind of understanding of family, like my cousin is Black and my cousin is Chinese and my cousin, like I have,
right.
what is my family is pretty unique and diverse. So because of that, it felt very natural for me to tell my cousin's authentic story. And it felt important to me that it showed the fact that he is Black and his experience with autism has been unique, because the fact that he sees his experience in research, his experience in outreach programs is unfortunately different because of the color of his skin,
Right.
And I think that's something that I felt also was important. He didn't have anyone to look to in film. I was talking to him, one night, and we were talking about, what are some good movies that I could go and watch? And I was trying to think of literally any film that had ever shown someone with autism who was Black. And and there isn't one. I mean, they most,
Right. Yeah. No, you can't. I
yeah,
can't think of any.
yeah. So it was even like the superhero movies where some of them kind of are Martian-y. That was as close as we got, you know.
Mhm.
We were like, there's no one that's not white. So we set out to make the film, so that honestly I said, why is your story, why don't we just make your story the first one that I've seen.
Right.
So that's kind of how that came.
Okay, that's great, and that's a great story. I mean, a great way it came to be. And from the film, I've seen it, and we'll link it in our description when this airs. So it'll be in the link below. It is just a wonderful story. It's a short film, about 30 minutes, and it's beautifully conveyed. Um,
Thank you.
and the direction that you took it in. What is the, and of course there's a lot of messages there, again, your cousin story. What is the message you're hoping to convey that the audience can connect to? Maybe they don't understand what autism is, or don't have a family member as you and I do.
Mm. So the number one thing I was trying to do with this film was speak out against the stereotype that that autistic people like lack empathy in some capacity, because I think the neurotypical community is, you know, systemically created to and built upon our expressions of empathy, or our expressions of you know, every emotion. And so I think it was really important to me that I made a film that was showing in every step of the way, including the inherent and necessary plot devices that showed the child's empathy at every moment, right? So it was
Mm-hmm.
like the incident of the film that kind of makes everything happen is the fact that he decides to stay home alone because he sees how much his mom wants it, and he knows that despite his fear, he wants to support her. That
Right.
empathetic gesture is like literally nothing would have happened in the movie if he hadn't done that, you know? So that combined with little things like the toast and all these other little moments in the film, those those moments were my goal. Even the way that he hugs her, you know, like I think a lot of films that convey autism show the kind of parent perspective and say very much like, oh, this is such a challenge and weight on me as a parent,
Mm.
which it like in many ways every parent has challenges to deal with when they're raising a child, you know.
Right.
But this kind of unnecessary, you know, storytelling of how much of a weight it is, I wanted it to be seen as like, look at how much this kid is loving you, just in the way that maybe more so than the way a lot of other kids would love their
Yeah.
parent, right? Like
Because
he's thinking about the toast, he's thinking about all these little ways that he can support his mom, including hug her and show empathy in the way that she needs it rather than the way that he would want it, you know.
hmm hmm
um, so that's kind of the main goal, is empathy.
right. And that just kind of reminds me of the one autism show that I can think of that's on
Yeah.
Netflix. I'm not going to name it because I don't want to name drop it, but I think everyone knows what I'm talking about. And
Okay.
they kind of show that same thing of the empathy, and it's not, oh, it's a burden. No, this child loves and cares, and you see the sister right next to him, and she's completely the opposite. She will be completely classified as normal, but his empathy is sometimes stronger. The better you see that the love is there, the care. So I can definitely see how, yeah, that was shown in your film for sure. So yeah, that again, a great job on that. What were some of and I've talked to a few directors at this point, so I know something's come up at one point, especially this being your first film, right?
The first long one.
Right. Okay. Your first
We've
long
made a
short
lot of
film.
It's always the case, right? Like every director, you talk with them and they're like, oh, is this your first thing? And you're like, well, I've been doing this for like years,
Right.
but you know,
Right.
technically I
My
guess
phrase, like independent projects kind
yeah,
of
first
thing.
one that we, you know, needed to spend ad dollars behind.
Right, exactly. So what are some of the pitfalls that came when you're directing and you're on set and you're shooting with the creating in a beat?
What are some of the pitfalls? Oh yeah, great question. So there's a million, obviously. If you're talking to other directors, you know, every moment is a pitfall. Um, but the, you know, the biggest one is representing autism accurately. I think, you know, despite having many friends on the spectrum, despite having consultants involved in our process every step of the way, from parents to people who are actually autistic to my cousin and my aunt, like we had a lot of people involved, and research centers. Like we were really trying to do it right, you know.
Right.
um but nevertheless, like, you know, there's so many times where it could go wrong, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think working with Cameron in the film, working with the way that Chloe reacted to his acting, you know, like all of those little tiny nuances in something especially like this where we're trying to be so naturalistic, you
Mm-hmm.
know, just had, you know, infinite number of moments where we needed to like fine tune it and say, oh, you know what, never mind, we got to retry that again, you know. um so it was definitely a challenge in the writing and the editing, in even the marketing of the
Mm-hmm.
film, you know.
Okay. And yeah, that I can see how that, because you have to get the research right, and you have to convey it right, because you don't want to just be have another stereotypical, oh, this is someone who has a handy disability, so now let's put them in a box. You're trying to convey something more positive, but you don't want it to go too far the other way, that it's like, okay, now I can't, that's not relatable, that's not realistic, that's
Mm,
not what they go through. And then
yeah.
your cousin probably been like, what is that?
What is
You know,
that?
it's
Who is
that
he?
right, what is that? But so in the cast, you were talking about Cameron
Chloe.
and and Chloe, and even the whole diverse cast, but they seem very much in tune. Was this their first time working together? Was this your first time working with these talents? Because they all seemed like the chemistry was naturally there. It really, I actually kind of looked up, like, is that her real son? Because
Yeah.
it seemed so natural.
Oh, I'm so glad. No, so yeah, they had never met before this film.
Oh,
And he is actually not autistic. So the process of getting him to a place of where he could convey that accurately, the process of her getting to know him. I mean, the thing about both of them though is that Chloe, like, I wrote the film knowing that I wanted her to be in it. You know, like I've grown up. She's just such an icon in the tap industry. You know,
mm-hmm,
that I've taken her class, I've watched so many videos of her in it, and like her ability, what makes her such an amazing woman is how empathetic she is. She is just this beacon of kindness and compassion and support, and she might not have a kid of her own, but she has this huge community of young children who are her, you know, progenies in many ways. Like she cares for hundreds of kids as though they're each her kid. So that was kind of an important quality in this character, because I wanted her to love this kid so wholly, and but you know, have her own goals and be her own independent woman, but also be so there for her child. And it was like you didn't even have to, you know, teach that to Chloe. She just is that, you know. And then
right.
same with Cameron. He similarly has, you know, he isn't autistic, but he had such an incredible amount of compassion and charm that those were the things I wanted to convey from my cousin, and say like, okay, so yes, my cousin is diagnosed on the autism spectrum, but he is an incredibly compassionate person, and I argue that his autism is what makes him uniquely empathetic. So so I explained some of those qualities to Cameron and in the audition, and when as I was speaking with him, I was moved by how much he seemed to like understand and comprehend my cousin's experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so it felt pretty easy to kind of get him on board and into the character.
Okay. And that's great that he was able to dive into that character and really get in depth and feel it, because as you said, he's not actually autistic, but that was his role, so he played it well. Will we hear more stories from Daryl and Angela, or how's that?
Yeah, good question. I hope so. But I mean, honestly, like you said, it's our first film of this size, and so we don't have. This is a piece that, for us as filmmakers, this is very much a piece that we're hoping will um, get us the support needed in order to make a longer form piece. You know, so now that the film's out and it's having such a wonderful response, and people are sharing it so well, it's like just we could not be happier for the support of the film. So so we're hoping that results in the funding we need to make something longer.
Right, and I hope that you do get that funding. And but I'm just seeing right now, 685,000 views for the trailer, and then 11,000 views, over 11,000 views for the film itself. And at this time, we're talking, the film has only been out about what, a week or two.
A week. Yeah.
So we, I mean, you know, should get way more views than that. Will you continue to create film dealing with handy-capable people?
So the disabled community is definitely something that I am passionate about, but I think in general as filmmakers, our goal is to look at the at social justice issues. We very much
Mm,
want to be involved in social awareness. We want to use the platform as a means of creating naturalistic representations of different types of social awareness. So I don't know if they'll always be in the disabled community specifically, but
right.
it certainly is something that I'm passionate about.
Right. And social awareness, I mean, that encompasses just so many topics. So pretty sure it'll always kind of come around in some way
Yeah,
or another. If it's not, again, not in every film necessarily, but okay, we'll touch on it here, we'll touch on it there. So I'm
yeah,
pretty sure it'll be in there at some time.
yeah.
Uh, Will, do you have any other films in progression or stories that you're working on that you like to kind of touch on or share with us?
Sean, I think at the moment we're really pushing to keep the focus on Innobeat. We do have some other projects that are going to be coming out. We have some like short projects that we're going to release on YouTube. It's similar to this one, a little bit shorter, so that people have kind of, now that we have people following our YouTube channel, we want to give some content. So we have all these like stockpiled things we're ready to release.
Okay, yeah.
There'll be some fun sci-fi in there. There should be some fun um, emotional, romance stuff in there. So we have smattering of short things that we're going to release, and then we're working on our first feature. So we'll see. Well, I can't tell about that though.
Right. We gotta keep it hush for now
For
until
now,
right. Um, 37 Lanes is your company, correct?
yeah.
Before we get into the where we can find the film and everything, can you tell us a little about 37 Lanes and some of the other projects you guys have worked on and been a part of that you can talk about?
Yeah, totally. So 37 Lanes was started by me and Jeff Hammerton, who's the cinematographer of In a Beat. So he and I have worked together on everything since we
Mm-hmm.
met. Literally the day we met, we've worked on everything together since that day. And so, yeah, I think he and our goal was really to uh, build the capabilities necessary to make the kind of films we want to make. And so we spent the last 5 years doing everything we could to learn and fine tune our skills as filmmakers. Meaning, like, we've shot commercials, we've shot music videos, we've shot dance films. I mean, like a lot of filmmakers, we shot documentaries. We've tried to kind of like learn from the gambit.
Mm-hmm.
But we also shot a lot of scene studies where we just got a few friends together and would do our best to do like a high quality version of just a practice, of
Right.
something we'd write or something we'd pull from another film. And we did a number of those in preparation for scenes in Beat. I mean, little things we learned from those too, of like someone's eating cereal in the film and we needed to do a practice scene to make sure that when you're chewing, the process of like cutting back and forth and making sure that they're chewing at the same time when they're talking is actually kind of a frustratingly annoying
Yeah.
process. So we had to practice that. And anyways, but yeah, so as 37 Lanes is at the moment predominantly a commercial and music video uh, production team as like a cinematography team. We go out for a lot of shoots as a cinematography team, and that's why we've stockpiled a bunch of gear, and we have our what do you call it? These remote camera carts that we built during COVID,
Mm.
so we can operate from basically like robotically operate a camera from outside of a house.
Okay, nice.
So we have some stuff like that we're working on, but this is our first venture into what we really hope to be the kind of center of our company, which is these social awareness films.
Awesome. That's great. And it sounds like it's going to be phenomenal when you guys can do it again. Now, with that, the whole thing we're in right now, the COVID-19 pandemic, how is that affecting your sharing even this film? Because right now you can't like go to a theater and play it.
Yeah.
So how is that having an effect on projects you're working on as well as getting In a Beat out?
That's a great question. So we are maybe super lucky that we're young and first time filmmakers because because to be honest, we wouldn't have had access to theaters anyway, even if they'd existed. So YouTube was really the playground we had, intended to be releasing it on, that or festivals. And so the festivals was really the only thing that kind of took an unexpected hit for us. But yeah, we were lucky that we'd kind of built our minds around releasing it online. And so, our whole advertising campaign and everything was just via the internet. So that was actually, kind of nice and natural. But the part of it that was a hard change was the way our shoots had to change, since everything is distanced. We did have to go and spend 2 months building these remote operated carts. But luckily, Jeff is just an absolute genius in my opinion, and I think he did a really wonderful job of creating something, and he's still working on making them more advanced. But his kind of ingenuity in that way is what has been able to keep our business kind of afloat throughout this period. So that's been awesome.
Nice. That's very nice. Where can we view and find In a Beat film?
So In a Beat is free on YouTube right now, and you can just search 37 Lanes or search In a Beat, and watch the full film, the trailer. We also released the full length dance scene, because in the film it's kind of cut up, so we have the full length behind the scenes version of that scene. So there'll be more content to come on that channel.
Awesome. And speaking of more content to come, how can we support you? How can we keep in touch with 37 Lanes, with Natasha Mynier?
So you can, thank you. I'd say you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can subscribe to it, follow us on Instagram, which would just be 37 Lanes or In a Beat Film.
Mm-hmm.
And you can, on our website, we have all the information about our films and commercials, and as well as like a donation page, because we've been getting small donations from people who are supporting our films, and we're using any of that money towards furthering the advertising of this film if they donated in regards to In a Beat, or furthering the next project if they're donating in regards to our next film. So yeah.
Okay, great. Well, be sure to do that. Be sure to subscribe to her YouTube channel. Be sure to follow In a Beat on Instagram, on social medias. And now, my question here, and it's going to change. I know it's going to change, because as a creative myself, my goals are constantly changing, and just in life, goals are changing. But as of right now, and I know we've touched on social awareness films, but what is your ultimate goal as a filmmaker? What is like the ultimate film that you want the big budget for, and you want to cast certain people for? What is that ultimate film you see now?
Interesting. The ultimate film. I mean, I like, some of my favorite filmmakers are like, the Coen brothers. I love Bong Joon's Parasite this last year. I mean, that was like one of the best films I've ever seen. I love Casablanca. Like, I think, and Tarantino, like, I think a lot of these really great filmmakers, what makes the movies so good is this kind of like comedy meets drama meets every genre in one film, meets like, genre films as well. So my goal, if I were to say one project, I've been really oddly obsessed with this story that I've been working on since college, which was do you know the myth John Henry?
Yes.
The American myth, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I've kind of been working on a version of that is much more gritty and much more realistic, and as kind of an interesting analysis of the Civil War time in the United States, and of this kind of point in history where we've been telling history from one perspective for a really long time, and I think there's some great filmmakers who are working on that kind of like alternate historical perspectives movement. But I'd love to be a part of that. I'd love to be a part of doing some big historical piece that involves great romance as well as great drama, and involves, of course, that incredible honorable Casablanca style ending. You gotta have a good honorable ending. Everyone loves that.
Right. Yeah. Sorry about that. I got a little weird feedback here. Zoom call. But yeah, that sounds like a great idea. I actually love that idea. Then, and then I'm interested to see your spin on it with that again, that folklore, that civil rights kind of thing to it, and on that happy ending because the John Henry, it was a cartoon short that I saw,
Yeah.
didn't have such a happy ending at
So,
the end.
I mean, you know, will it be a happy ending? I don't know. Actually, there's some really great historians who have written novels on his act, who it was the real man that all these myths were based off of. This like strong and, you know,
Right.
not necessarily blowing through mountains, but he was a a very you know, interesting guy. So yeah, I'd say that's in the realm of, I don't, you know, who knows if it'll be that exact story, but
Right.
that's the deal.
Now, and I'm curious to ask this, and I'm sure maybe some of our viewers are as well. How old are you? You say
How
you've
old
been
am
open
I?
5, yeah, 5 years.
I am 26.
Huh?
26.
26. So you've been doing filmmaking since you were 21, right out of college, I'm assuming.
Hmm.
Okay, where were you formally trained, or do you guys kind of just pick it up one day and say, "Hey, let's try some different stuff out"?
I so kind of both, I guess. I did go to NYU for screenwriting. I didn't study film there. I just
Hmm.
studied screenwriting, which is the one part, which is still studying film.
Right. Yeah.
But I had been a dancer, like I said, my whole life, and so I originally went to NYU for dance, and I had also originally kind of invested in film through dance. Like I had shot people's dance reels, shot weird kind of dance experimental things that I just felt like shooting, you know. And so I think that whole experience was really the beginning of me um, understanding that it wasn't that I just loved dance. What I actually loved was the storytelling aspect.
Mm.
And so then that's why I ended up switching over into screenwriting while I was in school there. And then after I graduated from that program, I was I moved to Los Angeles, and then basically the summer that I graduated, I met Jeff, and he is a far more established filmmaker than I was at the time. He had already made. He was in the last year of a documentary that actually came out this last year that's done super well. I think it won Seattle, um, but won at a bunch of different festivals. But it was a film about the gorge. It's
Hmm.
called Enormous. But he was in the last year of making that documentary, which was like a 3 or 4 year process. And he'd been shooting interviews with like Hall and Oates and Hosier and all these, you know, Dave Matthews, like just huge artists. So he'd gotten really comfortable with like how to make a long form film. And he also ran a whole rental business for all of his gear. So he was really the person who I attribute like training me, because once I joined him, I brought my storytelling skills and knowledge, and then he trained me on kind of the how to be a cinematographer, how to work with gear, how to have that kind of like filmic eye rather than just a writer's eye, you know.
Right.
um, but yeah, in you know, I am still 26, so I know that it's very much just the beginning, you know?
Oh, yeah, and we hope so. We hope it's the beginning of something that will blossom into a lot of wonderful other things, especially with this first film, seemingly doing so well. What's been some of the, and I'm sure nothing but positivity, but the feedback you've been getting from Beat?
Oh yeah, it's been incredibly positive. We've gotten, you know, I'll say the most surprising piece of feedback was I knew I wanted the film to be able to be accessed by the autism community. So I actually also released a version of the film that was sensory friendly. I basically just like spoke with a bunch of my friends who are autistic and said, if I make this dialogue doesn't seem to be a sensory kind of issue for you, what are the things that overstimulate you when you watch a film that nobody's really like attuned to right now? And there are movie theaters that dim the lights and do some kind of lower sounds, but so far in my experience of attending those, they've just been like everything's just less, you know, just
Mm-hmm.
quieter. And I wanted to create a soundscape that was, yes, quieter, but also different. So basically, what it ended up being is we left the dialogue all at full volume, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and then everything else was reduced below the level of the volume. So like people screaming or background sounds or music or anything, it was all, instead of being like dialogues here and then there's huge variance around it, you know,
Right.
we created all the variance below the level of the dialogue. That way there still was loud and soft. There still are dynamics, you know, but they just are 20, 30 decibels quieter than the dialogue is. And so that I hoped, and so far we've gotten good feedback on that. But people have been watching it, whether it's the sensory version or that version. I've been surprised to see how kind of like the phrase they said was, you need to prepare yourself before you watch this film, because it's so accurate in its representation of meltdowns. It might actually trigger you, and they were saying it's a wonderfully cathartic experience, but and I've loved it, but I do need to like watch it in the morning after you've had your coffee and your kind of meditation. And I thought, that's that could not be a bigger or more exceptional comment about I never realized that we were going to get the meltdowns that accurate, kind of thing. Like, I mean, I attempted to, but I was very moved to know that people were touched by that, and also so touched that they needed to kind of prepare themselves. So that was a very moving realization.
Right. Yeah, that sounds like definitely this kind of response that you want as a filmmaker, because you want to touch someone, you want to move, and you want to get that reaction. I think that's the goal with filmmaking, and not just any kind of creative space, is to get the audience to feel what you were trying to convey. And it sounds like you've done that. You've done a good job of that. So thank you again. And again, I just look forward to it growing and seeing and hearing more positive things from it, and seeing hopefully more social awareness films from 37 Lanes. And I hope you have a long and successful career ahead of you.
Thank you. You too. I'm looking forward to hearing the rest of the interviews that you have coming out.
Oh, thank you so much. Once again, can you tell everyone who you are, where you're joining us from, and what they're watching?
Yes. Okay. So my name's Natasha Mynier. I was the director of In a Beat, and I live in Santa Monica, California, and you're watching Live in the D with Mr. Beebe.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Mynier. Thank you so much, and we look forward to hearing more things from you.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Time for Live in the D with Mr. Beebe's weekly question. We ask, you answer. And here are this week's answers. The question: what are your favorite holiday movies? The answers: The Preacher's Wife, starring Whitney Houston and Denzel Washington. For Halloween, any of the Halloween Town movies. For Christmas, A Polar Express, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, A Polar Express, or How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Hocus Pocus. This has been this week's questions, brought to you by Live in the D with Mr. Beebe. Remember, we ask our questions for the month at the beginning of every month, so be sure to check out our social media at It's Mr. Beebe, and look forward to all of our questions at the beginning of each month, and you can possibly get your answers read right here on the air. Alright, this has been Mr. Beebe with this week's questions. We'll see you next month. We'll see you next week. Remember to stay safe and healthy. Bye-bye.
This week's quote on Live in the D with Mr. Beebe is, "Women belong in all places where decisions are being made." Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Live.
You are live with the people with Mr. Beebe.
Mr. Beebe.
With Mr. Beebe.
Live in the D with Mr. Beebe.
Hey.